Webbed is an incredibly fun game to go fast in. The jumping, web swinging, and even shooting lasers combine to make a movement system that is intuitive, but also incredibly deep and rewarding to master. There are, however, a few techniques used in speedruns of the game that require a bit more explanation. This is the first in a series of guides intended to explain those tips in text to hopefully make it easier for new players that are interested to start speedrunning the game. If you've ever watched a webbed speedrun, you've probably seen the runner open the journal at a few seemingly random points, then appear halfway across the map, slip through a glitch door, or get flung through a hallway. These are all examples of journal transitions, an unintuitive but also incredibly useful and interesting glitch that we use when speedrunning the game. Journal transitions are a versatile tool and are used at many key points in the run, often for unexpected reasons. This video will cover what they are, how to perform them, and where they are currently used in the any% run, along with some tips for each location. Journal transitions might seem daunting at first, but with a bit of practice they aren't too hard to perform consistently, and most of them save time even if they take a couple tries. So what is a journal transition? As the name implies, a journal transition is when you open the journal while transitioning between screens, specifically while the next room is loading, indicated by the swirl in the top right hand corner of the screen. For some reason, this makes physics objects on the new screen fall rapidly while the journal is open, which has a number of useful applications. The window for hitting a transition depends on load times, so a massive screen like the hub is much easier to hit than a tiny one like the elevator room. There are a few indicators to tell you if you succeeded with the journal transition, the main ones being sound cues and the map on the journal itself. These vary, so I'll cover these separately for each transition. Personally, I usually use the sound cues more than the map cues, because the map can only tell you if you were too early, not if you were too late. If you do open the journal too early though, it can help to have it bound to 2 hotkeys so you can quickly close, then open it again until you hit the transition successfully. Currently, there are 5 journal transitions in the any% run. In order, they are Moth Skip, Elevator Skip, Leg Transition, Reverse Mudslide, and Dung Transition. I'll start out with Moth Skip, the first journal transition in the run and by far the easiest to perform. This transition is between the boyfriend room and the hub, and can be performed whether or not you skip the beginning cutscene. Normally when you enter the hub, the moth immediately flies over to talk with you, starting a short cutscene. Journal transitioning here makes the moth fall down to the bottom of the screen before it reaches us, letting us slip by without talking to it. Moth Skip is the one I recommend beginners start with, even though it doesn't save the most time. The hub has the longest load time of any map, so the window for Moth Skip is huge, and it's early enough in the run that resetting isn't that punishing if you miss it. The map cue for this one is if the hub area is colored in, and the sound cue is the leaves vibrating. You will want to hold this one for 3 or 4 seconds to make sure the moth is completely out of the way before you move through. Depending on your angle and momentum entering the screen, you can either end up in the mud at the base of the tree, on the platform with the Lord of Flies, or on the ledge right outside the transition zone. If you aren't already at the bottom, you need to move quickly or the moth might catch you on its way back up. The next journal transition in the run is the elevator skip at the beginning of Ants. This transition is between the second room in Ants and the elevator room, which has a one-way door that can only be opened from further inside. Normally, we would have to take the time to fix the elevator to gain access to the main Ant hub, but by doing a journal transition into this room, we can make the one-way door fall out of the way for a couple seconds and let us through. This is one of the harder journal transitions and doesn't save much time, so I recommend picking it up last. The window for this skip is very small and there is no sound cue, so you need to know how to use the visual cues instead. If you see yourself at this dot, you haven't gone far enough yet. You want to be at this dot instead, but if you see yourself already starting to load into the next room like this, you've gone too far. I recommend holding the journal up for 3 to 5 seconds. The longer you hold it up, the more time you will have to make it past the door before it snaps back into place. This is one of the transitions where having 2 journal hotkeys helps the most, since the window is so small. Fortunately, this skip is very quick to retry, so you'll often see even top runners take multiple attempts without resetting. The third journal transition, Leg Transition, has a lot going on. This transition is between the main leg hub and the upper left leg room, the one with the hallway of death. The intended route through this room requires you to pass through a ton of traps, then at the end, bring a small leg piece up to connect to a big one, Then bring the completed leg down to the ant waiting at the bottom. When we journal transition, however, it makes the larger piece pop out and fall to the bottom, so we don't have to bring up the small piece first. A secondary side effect of the transition is that it removes all the traps in the hallway of death for a brief window, and if you place yourself in the right spot, the traps snapping back into place will launch you to the end of the hallway. For the map queue, this dot is the leg hub, which is before the transition. This is the dot you want to be at, and if you see the screen start to shift, you've gone too far. The sound cue is the traps falling down. For some reason, this transition only seems to work if you enter once, leave, then enter again with the transition. Hold this one for 4 or 5 seconds. If you don't hold it long enough, sometimes the leg doesn't fall all the way to the bottom, even if it pops out of its socket. The tricky thing about this one is that you won't know for sure if it worked until you make it all the way to the end of the room, so it's better to be safe than sorry if you're unsure that you hit it. The next transition, Reverse Mudslide, is probably the second hardest journal transition to pull off, but it's also by far the most important. This transition is between the power room and ants and the mudslide leading down from beetles. The mudslide is intended to be a one-way trap that makes you fall down from the beetle area to ants, but by jumping and lasering you can actually go back up it in reverse, letting us skip not only the hub, but also the entire first half of the beetle area. This is the only journal transition that is actually necessary for the current route, so I recommend trying to pick it up second despite its difficulty. To reach the loading zone from the ant side, you need to perform a web fling by spinning a web first with one mouse button, then switching to the grapple button to pull yourself up while lasering behind yourself to gain speed. If you don't have enough speed going into the loading zone, you will just bonk on the top of the screen. Normally, even if you do manage to fling yourself up here, there's a door that blocks the way unless you've fallen down the normal way first. Journal transitioning here makes the door move out of the way for just long enough to slip by it before it shuts. For the map queue on this one, if you see the big green check mark, then you've made it to the new screen. If you were too late, then the door will block your way when you close the journal, and you'll have to fall back down and retry. There's sometimes a sound cue of landing in the mud, but it's somewhat unreliable, so mostly you'll have to rely on the map queue and a general feel for the timing. You can also listen for when the music changes from ants to beetles. But similar to the map queue, it can't tell you if you went too far. This transition only needs to be held for a second or two, since slipping by the door will happen in the background while the journal is up. The last, and certainly least of the journal transitions in the run, is Dung Transition, at the end of the rolling dung ball section when you enter the hub, leaving beetles. Normally, when the dung ball breaks and rolls into the tree, it flips the switch that sends the elevator up to the top, forcing us to waste time bringing it back down. The purpose of this journal transition is to change the dung ball's momentum so that it doesn't enter the tree as fast, and also drop a couple ants onto the elevator to block the dung balls if they do reach the switch. You want to try to open the journal when the screen is entirely brown. This is another hub transition, so the window is decently sized, but in my experience it's a bit harder to time since you don't control your momentum going into it. It's better to miss this one early and then flicker the journal till you get it, since this one is impossible to retry if you were too late on it. The journal takes a second to pop up if you succeed though, so make sure that you don't accidentally close it by spamming the button if it doesn't appear immediately. You only want to hold this one for a moment to get the desired effect, so it's not really worth waiting around to check for cues if you succeeded. In fact, if you hold it down too long, sometimes the ball doesn't break immediately, which wastes a bit of time because of where the smaller balls end up, though it's still faster than bringing the elevator down again. So that wraps it up for the journal transitions currently in the any percent run. Technically though, this technique can be performed in any screen transition in the game. These are just the only spots so far that we've discovered practical uses for it. In the event that we do find any new ones, I will likely make follow-up guides describing each of those as they come up. Besides that, I have more web technique guides like this planned for the future, so if you found this at all useful or interesting, make sure to subscribe for more like it. Speedrunning this game is incredibly fun, so I strongly recommend giving it a try if you're even slightly interested in it. I know I just spent 9 minutes describing one weird trick, but most of the draw of the run really is just about the movement. Even casually, this game world is just fun to move around in, so don't get too hung up on specific techniques and just go for it. Stay swinging, and I hope I'll catch you flies next time.